Hello, BookTube. I have a tech question for you today. It's a tech question that, at its heart, is fairly exclusionary, which I try not to do on my videos. I try to include everybody. On my videos, I try to exclude only Brian and Bookish. The rest of you, though, more than welcome. But at the heart of my question today is something that I think only a tiny handful of you are going to be able to address directly. But it involves ebooks and the reading of ebooks. At the beginning of 2020, it became obvious to me as the publishing industry shut down in the form that it had had for the last 200 years and embraced electronic books. It became clear to me at the beginning of 2020, in the spring of 2020, that my reading was going to be radically different, that I wasn't going to be getting tubs of books in the mail, printed ARCs and then finished copies, that I wasn't going to be doing anything like that, and it wasn't going to be a question of supply and demand because publishers weren't there. The publishers weren't in their office. The shipping and receiving people weren't in their warehouses. There was no one on the loading docks. So it wasn't a question. These things just weren't available for months and months and months. But they were available electronically. They always had been. I remember for years, book publicists would say, there's also a PDF or an EPUB available if you want it. I ignored it completely. Everybody else did too in my profession. That suddenly became a live option in 2020. And I loved ebooks anyway. I'm a huge fan of them. I think they're just great. So I already was very fond of reading and annotating on my iPad. But when I saw that the topography was going to change like that, I thought, okay, maybe you should look into a dedicated e-reader. And I started researching on YouTube, as we do. And I naturally, the industry leader is the Kindle, the Amazon Kindle. I had a Barnes & Noble Nook. I kind of sort of liked it, but I thought, what about, to mark this epic occasion, why not get a new ebook reader? And then I thought, okay, is it necessary? You already read on your tablet, and you don't have any problems doing that. You don't experience any of the eye strain that a lot of people complain about. You don't experience any of the time-wasting distraction that people complain about, because I actually prepare the smelling salts here, control myself. So I didn't have to worry about that either. But I like my tech, and I like exploring new tech. So I did a lot of research on YouTube, and then I put the word out to all of you and said, I'm thinking about getting a Kindle, an e-reader, not a tablet, not a Fire, but an e-reader. What do you make of it? Do any of you have Kindle e-readers, and if so, do you like it, or does it sit in a desk somewhere that you don't even use? And I heard from so many people, all saying the same thing, a variation of the same thing, which is that not only did they love their Kindle e-reader, but that it changed everything. It was one of the best purchases they've ever made, that it changed their reading. Fundamentally, made it more enjoyable, made it... I heard the type of heaps of praise for the Kindle e-reader that I bet Amazon would love to hear themselves. And the praise centered around the Kindle Paperwhite. $120, $150 handheld e-reader. The praise centered around that. There's a basic Kindle that is less sharp, less responsive than the Paperwhite. And then there's the Paperwhite. And then at the high end of the spectrum, there is the Kindle Oasis. A differently shaped object. It's got a sort of a grip bar on one side. It has manual page turning buttons instead of just swiping on the device itself. And it's expensive. And I had that range to look at, and I decided after listening to a lot of you that I would go with the Kindle Paperwhite. And I got a Kindle Paperwhite and with a sleep and wake up case. And I tried it. When I first got it, I waited for the case, and I put it on, and I tried it, and I was initially nonplussed. I was initially not impressed, because I was used to the interactivity of the iPad. I was used to being on an iPad and being able to zoom right away to Wikipedia, to zoom right away to, some dedicated website or an author's website, or zoom right away to Twitter, book Twitter, something like that. And with a dedicated e-reader, there is always a kind of probationary browser on these things, but you're not supposed to use it. It's in beta mode, and it's going to stay in beta mode. These are supposed to be distraction-free devices. And when I first initially started using mine, the fact that it was distraction-free was actually a detriment. And I put it away. And a lot of you were disappointed by that. I felt bad about that because you love this device. A lot of you love this device. It has become the thing that your hand reaches for, which is fantastic. That is just fantastic. That it's books that does that. It's not Animal Crossing here. It's not Twitter or Instagram. It's books. The fact that so many of you never go anywhere without it, I heard that a million times, that it's the first thing you reach for, that it's made reading, it's given you your reading back without distraction. That was wonderful. I felt sorry that it didn't work for me. I put it on a shelf and went back to my Chromebook and my iPads, even my phone. And then the year went on and I was reading even more ebooks, more and more of them, sometimes in a whole month, almost exclusively ebooks. And on a whim, I thought, oh, well, you have this thing sitting right there. Why not give it another try? So I took it off the shelf and I thought, all right, well, you gotta dig around in your pile of cords and tech to find the power cord for this thing, because it's been sitting on a shelf all this time. It's going to be dead. It wasn't. It hadn't lost any power at all. It was good for it. It's still on that charge, which is amazing in its own right. Not to have to worry about the ritual of charging and the cords and whatnot. And I started reading on it, and suddenly the penny dropped. Suddenly the light went on, and I realized what you were all talking about. I realized that making notes to myself on an ebook, on a dedicated e-reader, is all I need to do on the first pass. I can wait. All of that at the moment research and checking up can all be done when I'm actually working up the review. That's when it should be done. I don't have to do any of that when I'm reading the book. And I realized, fractionally decreases my enjoyment of the book when I am thinking that way while I'm reading it. I should be concentrating on reading the book while I'm reading it and worry about writing it up, researching it, and reviewing it in the next pass. I suddenly discovered that with my Kindle and have been using it like crazy. Like crazy. Suddenly I get what you were all talking about, and I'm in the same boat. It's the first thing I reach for. And that eventually got me thinking. Because, as I mentioned, I like my tech. That eventually got me thinking that if those two factors are true, if I now get reading on a dedicated e-reader, and I now do, I now get that. I didn't before, but I do now. I get it. And if it stands to reason that my reading, vaccine or no vaccine, is going to continue to be 99% ebooks, then maybe in the new year, if I'm still reviewing books and I'm still speaking English and I'm still here and I still care about any of this, if I come back, in other words, in the new year, maybe I should upgrade to the Kindle Oasis, which is a different kind of device. It has a slightly bigger screen, has a one edge is raised a bit to make a natural grip for the hand. It has much greater pixels per inch. It's a much sharper device. And the reading light, the automatic light that comes on, there are 20-something of them. 20-something of those LED lights scattered around the frame instead of this thing, I think, has 5. And you can tell, when you're reading it in low light, you can tell where they're coming from. It's kind of a little penumbra where the lights are. Whereas with the Kindle Oasis, nothing like that is true. It's like the whole page is glowing straight up at you. And it's got a metal chassis. And the name Oasis derives from the fact that it's also highly water resistant. You can actually fully submerge it for 30 minutes or something like that in fresh water, not in salt water. And it'll be just fine. You won't ruin the device at all. The selling point being not that you're going to read it underwater, but that you might read it by the poolside or in the tub, and just not worry about it. That it's a water-friendly device, a water-friendly electronic device, which is great. But I'm 100% Boston Irish Catholic, so upon exposure to direct summer sunlight, my skin turns purple and starts weeping pus. so I don't go to the beach to read. And as much as I'd love, like any other civilized person, I'd love to read in the tub, but for years and years now, and probably for the foreseeable future, I don't really have one. I have one of those weird tub gestures that at the bottom of a modern shower that you can't even sit in the thing, much less relax in the thing. So I don't read in the tub. So I don't really care about the water resistance, but I care about those other things. It is a little bit awkward to handle this thing. You wrap the cover around like that, and you've got nothing to grip onto unless you hold it like that, which puts a strain on the wrist if you're reading for hours at a time. I like the greater screen size. I like the greater pixels per inch. I like the grip. I like the metal. I like the page turn buttons. I like all of the physical draws of the Kindle Oasis. Uh, and I'm wondering if that justifies the expense. These things are expensive. They're $250. And I would probably bump that up a bit. I don't want a model, for instance, that shows me Amazon ads. I would pay the extra amount not to have that. The model comes in 8 gigs of storage or 32 gigs. 8 gigs is enormously amount for ebooks. The 32 gig option is really there for people who want to store audiobooks, since those eat up storage. I don't want to store audiobooks, but I might want more than 8 gigs of storage for my books. So I would probably get the 32 gig version, and those things drive up the price. And so I've done a lot. I've been looking around on YouTube at all sorts of comparison videos for what it might be like to get a Kindle Oasis, or a lot of you have been suggesting alternatives, including Kobo. But if I wanted to stick with Amazon, if I wanted to stick in, especially since I might have an Amazon book of my own in 2021, if I wanted to stick with Amazon, my question here, the exclusionary part of the video, is I would like to hear from those of you who either have a Kindle Paperwhite and have upgraded to a Kindle Oasis, or who have a Kindle Oasis. I'd like to hear your pros and cons. It was your direct response, your direct testimonials one way or another about the Kindle Paperwhite that were by far the most helpful thing for me in terms of deciding whether or not to get one. Now I'm trying to decide whether or not to get a different Kindle device. I thought I'd come right back to the same source and ask you what you make of the whole thing. Do any of you have Kindle Oases? And if so, did you upgrade from a Kindle Paperwhite? The very specific audience that I'm aiming at here are the people who upgraded from a Kindle Paperwhite to a Kindle Oasis and can tell me what that's like. If it's not a big deal, it seems to me that it would be a big deal. It seems to me that I would notice right away all of the differences. But maybe I'm wrong about that. If it's not a big deal, then I'd like to hear about it. As far as I can tell from the research that I've done, exporting the notes that you take on a Kobo is a little tricky and sometimes doesn't work. And that's essential. I absolutely need to be able to do that. And that works on Kindle books. So I don't know. I'd like some feedback about Kobo. I'm pretty sure that Barnes & Noble Nook has the equivalent of a Paperwhite, or an Oasis, a Kindle Oasis. I'm pretty sure they probably have a more expensive dedicated e-reader, but most especially the Kindle Oasis. I'd like to know if you have it and should I get it. Let's say in the new year. so there's a tech question for you on this gray Sunday. And I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.